growing up, there was nothing that I loved doing more than playing football. I'm talking about American football. Going out to the field before practice with my best friend, he played receiver, I played quarterback, was my favorite thing to do. And putting on shoulder pads and a helmet and running out of the tunnel before the games with the music blaring with all my teammates, nothing was better than that to me. And even just throwing the ball in the backyard with my brothers or watching the Colts or the Hoosiers on the weekend, I loved it all. I'll tell you one story. It's one of my favorite stories. It happened during my freshman year season. So this was the first time I'd gotten to wear the red and the green, the high school colors, week 1 against our rival high school team. And I'd thrown 2 touchdown passes in the game, and I just throw my third, and I'm coming off the field. And one of the coaches, who I don't even know that well, is just waiting for me. I can just tell he's really excited. And finally I get over to him, and he smacks my shoulder pads and smacks me across my helmet and says, "Bro, you're the real deal. You're our quarterback, you're our leader, and we're going to go as far as you take us." Yeah, I know. I can't not smile either because it's one of my favorite stories and it made me love football that much more. And so going into my sophomore year season, I'd never been so excited. We had a great year. Going into my sophomore year season, I was projected to be the starting quarterback on the junior varsity team, and we're playing against our rivals in week 1. And all of it was taken away. I took a really hard hit in that game and had to come out of the game, and I started to get some really bad headaches. And these headaches kept coming, which was weird because I'd never had headaches in the past, and I'd never had migraines before. And so I was in and out of different hospitals. We were trying to figure out what the diagnosis was, and after my 3rd MRI, I'll never forget that next morning, my mom waking me up, and she shakes me and she says, Josie, we have to go to the hospital. You're going to have surgery." Now that morning is a little blurry because I woke up with the worst headache of my entire life. And I've never been in so much pain. Riding in the car to the hospital with my mom, I had to put my hand on my forehead, push down as hard as I could because that was the only thing that was giving me relief from this pain. So finally, get to the hospital, my mom and my dad are sitting there, and a neurologist and a neurosurgeon walk in. And they start to tell us what they found out through the MRI, which was basically that I had a cyst on the right side of my brain that had ruptured. And it was causing all this cranial fluid to push down on my brain, which is what was causing all this pressure, all the nausea, and all of these headaches. And so they told us they were going to have to go in and operate on the cyst and drain it to relieve the pressure. Now, I was relieved to hear this news because I was looking for anything to get past these headaches, but the news that came next was the most devastating thing I could have heard that day, which was that I'd no longer be able to play contact sports and that I'd never play football again. And so thank goodness the surgery went as planned the next morning, and I was in the intensive care unit in the hospital for about 2 weeks, going through neurological tests and just making sure that the recovery process went as it should. And after about 2 weeks, I was finally able to go home. And I was so relieved to go home because being in that hospital bed was one of the worst things. But going home that night, I remember I was so scared and so fearful because I was going to finally have to face the reality that I no longer had football. Now, during the recovery process, my doctors encouraged me to eat as much as I could because I had lost a good amount of weight and get some light exercise. So most days actually consisted of my mom driving me to Taco Bell, where I'd get 6 soft tacos with no lettuce and a little side of cheese sauce. And we'd go home, and then we'd go for a walk on the golf course to get some light exercise. Now, during these walks is when I really started to talk to her about what was going to be next for me. What was I going to do to fill this void? And I made the decision that I was going to run track. I thought maybe dedicating myself to another sport was going to allow me to focus on something else and really fill that void. And it's really funny to look back now because I picked the only sport that the high school offered where you're forced to constantly run laps around the football field. So looking back, I can laugh about it, but at the time it was really hard because I always saw my teammates out there, I always saw my best friends out there, and I was no longer able to play. And during this struggle, and during this time, is when I started to realize the power of influence. And what I mean by the power of influence is the amazing opportunity that we as human beings have to positively impact one another. Now, these can be formal influences that so often come from friends and family, but they can also be small influences, or people that just take it a step further when they don't have to. Now for me, my family was unbelievable during my setback, and I can never thank them enough for everything they did for me. But when I reflect and think back, I also had all these small influences that were so important in making this a turning point in my life. I'll give you some examples. I had 2 track coaches who were honestly more like friends to me. They gave me nicknames at practice like Moheban instead of my last name, Moheban. Always put a smile on my face, always made me feel like more part of the team. They designed these elaborate winter workout plans for me to make sure that I was training and being able to reach my peak before the season. And if I got hurt, they'd show up at 6 a.m. to the school to take me through a one-on-one workout on the bike or in the pool. And on what seemed like my worst days, they'd call me into their office for a one-on-one meeting where we just talk, and I'd always leave feeling so much better. I also met a mentor through this process. Now, this mentor was the assistant superintendent of our district, and he would take me out of school to take me to breakfast. At these breakfasts, he would tell me things like, I could see you being the CEO of ESPN one day. Or I could see you owning the Chicago Cubs or the New York Yankees one day. He was the only person in my life telling me these things, and I remember walking out of each of those breakfasts always having the most confident and positive outlook about myself, thinking maybe these things were happening for a reason. In my senior year, my former football coach approached me and asked me if I'd come back to coach the quarterbacks as a student. And to this day, it's been one of the most enjoyable experiences of my entire life. Thank you. Now, since the surgery, I've thought about these people and these experiences every single day. And I have no doubt that it's what has allowed me to be here today as the co-founder of 220 Youth Leadership. And what's been amazing and so fun through our work with 220 is I've found the power of influence in some of the most successful people in the world. I'll give you a couple examples. Muhammad Ali, one of the greatest fighters of all time, got his bike stolen when he was 12 years old. Muhammad Ali got his bike stolen. So he goes to the local police officer and asks him if he'd help him find his bike. And not only does he help him find his bike, but he teaches Muhammad Ali how to fight so that it would never happen again. And this was his introduction into boxing and fighting. When Bill Gates, the founder of Microsoft, was in high school, the Mothers Club bought a computer processor that Bill fell in love with. And that year at school, one of the teachers asked him if he'd be willing to teach the computer programming class to his peers. In a recent 60 Minutes interview, Bill credits this experience as being the start of his journey to creating Microsoft. And when J.K. Rowling, the author of the Harry Potter series, was young, no one thought she was going to be a success at writing. But she had one friend, and this one friend always gave her the confidence and positivity to just keep writing and keep trying to pursue it as a career. And to this day, she credits that friend for always being there for her. Now, in no way am I comparing myself to Muhammad Ali, Bill Gates, or J.K. Rowling, but I'm absolutely comparing the people who helped them and the ones who helped me. The police officer that helped Muhammad Ali went above and beyond his call of duty, just like Coach Mack and Coach Goodwin did for me. The teacher that gave Bill Gates an unforgettable experience that helped him launch his first company is exactly what Coach Dilly did for me. And J.K. Rowling's friend, who always gave her the confidence and positivity to just keep going during some of the hardest times, is exactly what my mentor Bob did for me at those breakfasts. And so never underestimate the power of influence, especially as life skills educators, not in your work and not even in your next conversation. Because so often, it's the small influences that have the greatest impact. Thank you.